I'm pleased to introduce our speaker today, who is Reverend Trish Glare. And by the way, she's out of state, so she's going to be speaking to us from Zoom. She's a warm, dry weather. Trish has been a member of the chapel since 2018, and she's the former secretary and president of the board of directors. She's currently a novitiate minister, pursuing full ordination through the chapel. She's also a graduate of international medium Joseph, and I hope I say this right, Joseph Shiel, S-H-I-E-L, Shiel's evidential mediumship mentoring program. And she received her mediumship certification and Reiki practitioner certification through the Montclair Psychic School. Her studies in metaphysics began in the 80s and continue to this day with a current focus on energy work, psychic phenomena, and spirit communication. And she's good at it too. As you can see with her book, Wisdom from the Podium, she is extremely creative. She wrote the book, and the cover is her artwork. She also creates beautiful pottery and needlework, and probably much more that we don't even know about yet. She's just very creative. I have to add that when we shut down for COVID, it was Trish who recommended that we continue services on Zoom. And at that time, using her personal account to do so. So look at us now. How about that? Thank you, Trish. Trish believes that greater peace in life is possible when you understand how the highs and lows of your current experience support your path in this incarnation. So our speaker today via Zoom, Reverend Trish Glare.
Thank you, Betty. And the title of my talk today is, To Whom or What Are You Giving Your Power? And the idea of the talk came to me initially in the pondering of this being Memorial Day weekend. So it didn't end on the Memorial Day weekend theme, but it was really where I started with this theme. And as I was thinking about it being Memorial Day, I really wanted to try and maybe tie in Memorial Day, maybe metaphorically, the way I tied in Palm Sunday as a metaphor for our lives in general. But it didn't go in that direction, but it was the start. When I first started thinking about it, I realized in all the years, since I can remember, Memorial Day has been such a big celebration. It was always the first big family gathering of the year in my family. And I never really looked into the history of it. So just to start off, I just wanted to honor Memorial Day and recognize from a couple of things that I got from history.com. And it actually began in its original form as Remembrance Day back in 1868, when someone named General John Logan, who was leader of an organization for Northern Civil War veterans, called for a nationwide day of remembrance. At that time, he called it Decoration Day, but it gradually became known as Memorial Day, and it was originally just to honor those fallen soldiers of the Civil War. Eventually, it evolved into a recognition and a memorial celebration for all of the wars that we've been in the United States. And for decades, it was observed on May 30th through the 1900s until 1968, when Congress passed the Uniform Monday Holiday Act, establishing it on the last Monday of May, and it was declared a federal holiday. So just a little history on Memorial Day. But as I was going through a lot of my research on Memorial Day, I found myself really drawn into the emotional experience that the people who have suffered through these wars must have felt. I mean, in each of these wars, at least for a time, the reality as they knew it potentially was at risk, right? It was this specter of doom that hung over them. And I became really caught up emotionally in this, and I was having a hard time separating myself until somewhere in that fixation, I started seeing this Specter of Doom as kind of an archetype. And as I did that, it allowed me emotionally to separate from the reality and the emotion of the event and to see it more as an archetypal experience, and to understand that every generation really has some example of this specter of doom. And it really is almost it's an archetypal situation. You know, for us here in the now, global warming is our threat. It's part of our threat, in addition to foreign entities. In the 1970s, my brother was absolutely fixated and terrorized by this prediction that the population was growing faster than our ability to feed our population. And for many, many years, he was terrified that there would come some time of doom when Armageddon would happen because we couldn't feed the world's population. We all have this notion, and somehow it's this concept of an archetype. And so that was really the path that I ended up going down, is this idea of these world experiences of life and the archetypes. And you might be thinking, well, what does this have to do with where do you give your power? So I'm going to get to that. But for now, let me explain first, just to clarify, what really are we talking about when we talk about archetypes? An archetype is really a fundamental pattern of behaviors or thoughts. It's a symbol of things that are typical in our lives. So if you're a tarot card person, you know, obviously Pam, our tarot expert, every card in the major arcana bears a symbol of an archetype: the Fool, the Magician. We have Empress, Lovers. But that's not the only place they show up. These are common categories that show up in other things. Carl Jung spoke of 12 archetypes in human existence, in the roles that humans play in their lives. So he spoke of the innocent, everyman, hero, outlaw, explorer, creator, ruler, magician, lover, caregiver, jester, and sage. Those were the 12 archetypes Carl Jung saw people identifying as them, you know, how they identified themselves. And moreover, he believed that we're all pre-programmed to search for these archetypes in our day-to-day lives, because archetypes really give us a blueprint for understanding things that we're not familiar with in this exact instantiation by associating them to something we are familiar with, something from a past that's been similar. And so the archetype is a way of dealing with the world in general and our limited understanding of things. So how does the archetype become important in talking about your power in this or any situation, whether we're talking about wars or portentions of doom, or, you know, the Tower card, or the lover, or, you know, who has wronged you? If you can recognize the archetype, whatever situation you're in, and you can abstract it to that archetype, it then allows you to understand the emotional construct and the mental pattern that you have associated, or you've come to involuntarily associate with that archetype. And by doing that, by having that recognition, it allows you to start disassociating the emotion of the situation from the circumstance and whatever is happening there. And that situation becomes something that you can then approach dispassionately. It becomes something that you can then start to understand as part of the illusion of reality, if you will, in order that you can then make the change and grow as you need to through the experience of living that at your soul level. It's really difficult to remove yourself from the emotion in the immediate situation, so that you could even ask yourself, you know, what is life trying to show me here in order for my soul's growth? When you're in the heat of the moment, it's almost impossible to do that. But if you can see that situation as another version of something that you experience over and over, that becomes your clue into starting to look at it dispassionately and objectively. We had Nolan Renish, who spoke with us a couple of weeks ago in his evening with a sage, and then talked about again last Sunday in his talk. And he spoke to a very synergistic way of approaching it, the same type of thing, this understanding of how life's lessons come in and affect our reality. And his teaching, he was explaining radical forgiveness. And this is the technique that recognizes that everything that happens in your life is part of what you needed or planned for your soul growth, including those things that are very, very painful to you. So you're either experiencing them through your own situations and what you're perpetuating on yourself now, or because you needed to experience that pain. And this is a very synergistic idea, and it goes back to the recognition that we are really part of the reality that we create for ourselves. This is entirely our reality. And because of this, we have the power to change the way we react to it. Indeed, we have the power to change reality for ourselves. We don't necessarily have the power to change reality for someone else because that's their power. But this is how we start really taking power from situations that can make us feel powerless. If we allow ourselves to get caught in the emotion without realizing this, without really taking control of the responsibility, then we are giving our power away. And the exact opposite of this position of power is the victim mentality. This idea that someone else or some set of circumstances are doing something to you and you're prevented from being able to do something better. So if someone else is responsible, then the power for change is also responsible to them and is out of your control. And it can be very uncomfortable to accept the fact that some of these hardships you're experiencing are in some way, shape, or form your doing. But until you take that, then you don't take your power. And you continue to see yourself as a victim, and you don't have that opportunity to change. So this is really where the power aspect of these things come in, and why it's so important to use tricks like seeing the archetype situation. So how do you do this? How do you change the mindset and begin to take your power? There's a fundamental requirement, and that is that you have to begin to believe the absolute truth of the fact that you create this reality. This is a foundational belief, and you will not be able to make the transition from believing to knowing until you fully accept this, and it's going to take time. It takes time to move into this because a lot of times our own spiritual path has disempowered us, has taken away that power, has given us the perception of separation. And it takes time to really build that up, and it takes experiences that come into your life and that create for you over time that understanding that you are really in charge, whether you choose to claim it or to give it away. So I have some tips and tricks that I wanted to share from my own experience in my own life, and things that I think make for better progress and quicker progress on this transitional road from going from believing, in some dogmatic religions, they say, just trust, God has a plan. You don't have to understand, just trust and believe. Well, on the metaphysical side, as spiritualists, we really need to know. We need to know that we are part of that power, and that's when we really become in charge. So what are some of the tips and tricks that I've got to offer that have helped me along the way? So here's the first one, and this is attribute every success or aspect of joy in your life to your own self and to your thoughts and actions. You have to completely abandon modesty in your internal thoughts, that which you speak to yourself. Don't go back to some of the pre-programmed dogma from religions that may have made you feel like, well, I'm not really worthy of that, or I can't really do that. You have to abandon the idea that you couldn't have possibly been responsible for that, or you must have gotten lucky, or I prayed and God did this for me and it was separate from myself. You have to remember that in this belief system, we know that we are part of that God force. And so we work in conjunction with God. So if God did it, so did you. So attribute every success and joy in your life mentally to yourself. Second tip is See and acknowledge all the synergies around you and mentally say thank you as a way to validate them. And if you do this, you'll see more and more. They will just keep coming and keep coming. At first, you don't even worry about whether or not you're assuming or claiming a synergy where something wasn't. Just claim it anyway, because even if something else brought it to you, it shows that you value results and that you're grateful for them. And this draws power to you. This tells the universe you appreciate these things. You appreciate being able to see, and you'll recognize them and you'll give them credence and you'll see value, and that will bring the power in and give you more of those synergies. Here's another tip and a trick that I use, and it's the show me statement. So when you really need something in your life, you need change to happen. This is best if you do it when people are around, because they'll think you might be a little crazy. But I just look up and I say to the universe, show me. If you need a job change and you don't know how to go about it, you say, show me the way. If you need something to manifest in your life, you say to God, show me. And then you look and you expect that within just a day or two, maybe an hour or two, not years, but very soon, you are going to see a result. And you need to recognize it and give gratitude for it, and then say thank you, because that brings it full circle. You ask to be shown, expect to see the result, and give gratitude, and that completes the circle and keeps it going. The next tip is that you have to continuously affirm that both the good and the bad in your life are aspects of yourself, including those negative patterns that still need to be rooted out and resolved. Going back to this, taking responsibility for all the things that happen in your life and take power over them. So we kind of talked about that a lot. And so the last tip is really the most important one. And this is one that I think a lot of us who've come from other belief systems fall into and experience. Here's the most important one. Don't try to convince non-believers of this truth. It's just going to lengthen the amount of time it takes for you to transition from believing to knowing, because you've built up a trusted circle of support maybe before you came to this understanding, and they are people you trust, and in their doubt, as a sensitive, you are going to feel some of that doubt rubbing off. And it's not going to keep you from this. It's not going to keep you from knowing, but it's going to extend the amount of time it takes to get there. You have to accept that people in your life who can't accept this form of reality, that we are partners in this creative process with the universe, if they're not in a place where they can understand that, you have to just accept that in them and realize that that's part of their foundation and part of their solid ground right now. They need that space. And this can be really painful, because a lot of times these are people who you most trust or you most want to share in your excitement about the things you've realized and how you really are not crazy. Maybe when you see things or you hear things or you experience things and you feel empowered and you want them to understand, and they just can't. So you have to give up the idea of convincing the non-believers, because it's just going to prolong the time that it takes you to step into your power. And who knows, in their version of reality, mysticism may not even exist. We don't know. The fabric of reality is so unusual. Their reality may not have this. And so they could be right and you could be right too. You don't have to worry about that. What you need to do instead is make sure you find your community of support in people like this church group that we have. There are other spiritualist churches that share this belief set. Attend workshops and classes. Podcasts and video podcasts or vodcasts are great sources of feeling like this really is normal and finding your acceptance and validation in those, rather than trying to convince those who just aren't ready to understand or believe. So those are the things I wanted to share with you today. And I go back and ask you one final time, to whom or to what are you giving your power? Are you giving your power to situations beyond your control? To people who would try and convince you that that's not really your power, and who are trying to take that power maybe from you without realizing it, is that where you're giving your power, or are you taking it into yourself, accepting the responsibility, and stepping into that place of knowing? And I say to you all, if you aren't already doing it, please claim your power. It is yours to claim. So thank you very much. That's what I wanted to share today.